question, but how many of you are still playing Adventure Capitalist? Yeah, I mean, come on, you can't not. Let's introduce you guys first. I mean, so Lars, do you want to just introduce yourself and sort of describe what you do at?
Sure. Is this actually working? Everybody hear me? All right, good.
I can hear you.
Lance Priebe, CEO at Hyper Hippo.
You have the title Creative Catalyst as well?
I pretend to be the CEO of the Creative Catalyst. I'm the creative guy. Sam actually runs the whole show. He's the dreaded pirate captain of the whole show.
I love that title.
Quick little history of the background. My background, started off as a web designer, got into web-based gaming in 1999. I'm getting old now. And I was one of those early developers for those websites called miniclip.com, Yahooligans, Congregate, all those guys grew up there, and made this little world with these penguins that walk around waddling, it's called Club Penguin. That grew. That's where it put Clone on the map for video games. And after spending some, I think you guys all know the history, I'm going real fast, we sold it to Walt Disney Company in 2007. 2010, I was going crazy because I'm an entrepreneur, so I got to make stuff. And back to Creative Catalyst. And decided to start Hyper Hippo. And left the Walt Disney Company, started a new studio. Had this great ambitions to create giant games. Spent 2 years. Many developers probably can understand the same story. Spent lots of money, 2 years. Shipped a title, nobody cared, nobody played, nobody did anything. So decided to go back to the books and say, okay, so what did we do wrong? What are we going to do right? So look back at our own name of our own studio, Hyper. Let's focus on the Hyper component and make as many games as we can and find out what the fans really, really like. And that's where that's my speed history to get to
great
here.
Speed history, yeah.
Now we can get into venture capitalists in a moment.
Yeah. No, I like it.
I'll let Sam do a quick introduction.
Yeah, exactly.
Too.
Sam, tell us about yourself.
I have the distinct pleasure to be a Hippo, and thank you for having us here. It's great to have PG Games here, and thanks for the support for it, because we are big believers in BC. It's a great place to build games. I don't have the creative genes that these guys have, so I look at the world through more of a business lens. I come from a business background, and the video game industry is a fascinating industry. It pulled me in a big way, not because of the creative, which I love, absolutely love, but because it is one of the most amazing industries that you can be a part of right now in industry. And so it's thrilling. It goes at the speed of light. You guys know that. It is growing faster than most industries can dream of, and it is a great place to work. It is a challenge. It is a joy every day, and I get to work with amazing people. And I was excited when I got to see that I was a part of the 1%, because the 1% means that I'm over 50.
I'm over 40. I'm in the 1%. There's nobody over 40.
I'm not saying a word. I'm too old.
But there is a lot of opportunity in this industry, and so very excited to be here today. And
so
hopefully help.
One of the things we pulled together a few slides. Well, you guys pulled together the slides. I just said, yeah, I like them. But one of the things you started off by saying was this idea of being bold.
Being bold.
And I think that's right. I mean, particularly this idea, business guy, creative guy, making something, the big magnum opus of game development you wanted to make, no one wanted. You make lots of crazy stuff, and this thing that people click turns out to be
totally.
How does that fit in with this mindset of being bold?
I'm going to set the stage.
Set the stage.
So, we just finished working on this very large project. We spent millions of dollars and featured in Wired magazine, featured everywhere. A great thing. I think 800,000 people downloaded it. We didn't make any money. We didn't learn any lessons. Let's just have a sad moment there. So we went back to the team and we went, well, we got a little bit of runway still. We got some cash in the bank. We can still do something. So let's go back to our roots, back to the good old web game days, way back in the early 2000s stuff, and started to just get some ideas together from the team. And Sam came up with actually be bold. We went to the team, went, what are the craziest ideas you want to do? What are the ideas that are actually going to stand out over the whole audience? We don't want to be another studio that just takes the safe road and makes another There's nothing wrong with clones and stuff. Our industry needs it. Hollywood has it everywhere. It's a good business model. But we wanted to be something like, if you're going to take the big risk, then you're going to have the big reward. So the team came up with all these ideas, and I made a rule to the team that I would provide all the teams. They could break up into groups. They get budgets. They get programming, talent, etc. And I couldn't say no. They got to go. But they only had a short leash. They had a little bit of time to prove that the game worked. They had to show me that they had an audience that would engage and be interested in that idea. And if they did have that, if they could validate their idea, then we put more budget in and they can go further. So when we say be bold in our studio, we just tell the team, just what is the biggest idea? So Venture Capitalist, and the birth of that one title, we did a whole bunch of titles. You can actually switch to the next slide.
Oh.
So that first year, we came up with a whole bunch of games. Well, the RuneScape AdVentures, that's this year, so we'll talk about that one too.
Okay.
The team came up with the crazy ideas. This one guy, Cody, in our studio, game designer, he said, I want to make a game where you watch progress bars load. Wow. Sam didn't say anything. I just sat there going, that's the dumbest idea. And the team reminds me every week that I said it was the dumbest idea. But I also said I would approve every idea, and here's a budget. Go make your idle bar simulator. So Cody said, I'm going to make this idea. He's a writer, by the way. This guy writes. He doesn't even code, doesn't draw, doesn't anything. He couldn't convince any of the engineers in the whole studio to help him because they all looked at him going, that's a dumb idea. So we extended his leash. He learned Unity in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, got his idle bars going.
I approve.
He put it up on Congregate. It was a quick little web game. Do you remember the early numbers? It was...
We had about 30,000 people that first weekend. We had about 30,000 people.
We broke like 1 million people playing that game in like under a month, I believe it was.
Oh yeah.
And retention rates on a web-based game were near 50% on a day one retention, and we went.
My mind.
We knew there was something wrong with the
minds. So the whole team had been working on all these other games, some of the games you see here, and none of them had compared. There was all these charts, and there's this one game, this idle bar simulator. Mm-hmm. We went, okay, well, I guess that's what the studio's working on. You can go to the next slide here. So, as a studio, we challenge all our team to validate all their ideas. If you're going to be bold and you're going to be memorable, that means you're taking a lot of risk. But if you're going to take a lot of risk, you got to reduce that risk somehow. So, I'm a big fan of the lean startup principles for entrepreneurs, etc. And lean startup is a little tricky in gaming because we're not actually solving a problem, so it's hard to actually measure against. Right?
I'd argue we kind of are, but it's an entertainment problem.
It's an entertainment problem.
And I agree that's a bit more messy.
A little bit more messy. So we've worked hard. We haven't got a perfect formula yet. One day we'll speak about how do we actually validate games. I'm open to talking to anyone that wants to dive deep into this topic. But we're trying to just dig into those metrics. Like, how do we find out that someone's actually interested? Like, is session counts? Is it retention? Is it playthrough? Is it a puzzle game where they actually progressed or something? How do we measure it? So we try to validate all our ideas before we unleash the large purse strings and let the gold flow on the table and the developers are dancing around the studio. Anyway.
The OODA Loop, just to speak to the slide, I'm sorry, I'm seeing a different slide.
We see one ahead here.
Well, that's my job. The reason we use the OODA Loop is because of this whole idea of speed. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the OODA Loop, but this was bringing outside business principles into the gaming industry. And the OODA Loop isn't a business principle. It's actually comes from the U.S. Air Force, and it's the whole idea of their jet fighter pilots were losing all the dogfights in the Korean War. And so they did a whole bunch of research as to why that was happening, and they found out that it's not that they had worse planes or anything like that, but they found out that their pilots weren't thinking quick enough. And so they needed to think quicker. And so they needed to develop a way of thinking, how can we think quicker so that we can win more dogfights? Because if you lose the dogfight, you lose big. You're dead. And so we took that principle and looked at that in how it works within game design. And it's like, this is an industry that doesn't, if you're playing, the guy you're fighting against is observing, he's then just orienting himself and then making a decision and then taking an action, and it takes him this long to do that. You got to go quicker around that loop, or else you lose your dogfight. And if you're not quicker around that circle, you're going to be dead. So it's a simple binary thing, one way or the other. You're dead if that's the case. So we looked at that and applied that to our studio and said, you know what? This is what the industry is doing. We need to go quicker. We need to go quicker. And so how can we go quicker? And that's where our small team and being able to have a lean, mean fighting machine, like as Lance talks about, is in the lean process.
Because there are clear parallels with where Supercell kind of breaks these structures down. But it seems to me like you've condensed that down into kind of a very simple, lean startup style loop.
Very simple. Like, so OODA Loop, if this is a new concept, you guys can Google it. It's pretty elaborate. It's well documented on the internet. OODA Loop goes back to, why does a venture capitalist work? Okay, so OODA Loop is simply this idea. You observe what's going on in the industry, what's going on out there, etc. We observe that there's mobile games. People enjoy casual games. People actually do not enjoy coming back to a casual game, this burden of it, but they enjoy the reward of having their little garden that grows. But why am I punished to have to show up every 6 hours or something? So we observed that. Orientation, the second O, is, well, what are we? We're a studio, we're capable of doing this, we have the resources, we have the talent. What's your equipment, what's your tools, what's your ability? We went, we could definitely go after this, and we noticed an opportunity in what's now become either incremental games or idle game, which is becoming a genre. Apple has gracefully featured us, Apple and Google, I think it's 18 times just for that topic. For games that can constantly play without you playing. Very fascinating.
I mean, that's a crazy idea in the first place. It's so crazy.
But our fans write us back saying they're so rewarded. We have pilots, which we're all probably grateful they're not playing, that tell us that they love our game because when they're at the airport, they get things set up, they put it away, they do their job, and they feel like the whole time they're flying that they're playing. And then when they land, they check in. I'm sure they're checking while they're flying, but they feel good. They have this feedback loop that we get from gaming, but you don't actually have to be in it. It's very strange. So then D and OODA Loops decide. So we as a studio, as you heard, I don't make the decision. If they can show me validation, it is approved. So we've removed that piece of the loop. I've worked at large corporations stuff where decide takes months. So we may have noticed an opportunity in the market. We may have noticed that we have the capability of doing it. And then 6 months later, PowerPoint presentations and decision-making process, we don't execute on it. And then that opportunity is then missed. And of course, A is act. Can you actually do it? So
I just sort of nailed down that little bit you just said about you kind of cut the decide loop action out. That's really
as tiny as I can.
Because you've kind of said the default is yes, up to this budget.
Up to this budget with these metrics.
The decide part of the loop comes from the fans. That's what happens.
So you're effectively automating that process with the audience, which is actually, I think, brilliant. I mean, because I used to be one of the kind of operator guys back in the day when mobile operators had a role to play, and so if I didn't like a game, it didn't get launched, and I was always right, because if you didn't get launched, you didn't get to make any money. Therefore, I must have been right. I'm joking, but you get the idea.
A venture capitalist would have never been born.
So, exactly. But the point is that this audience, realizing the audience is the most important part of it, I think it's actually something we still, to this day, don't really recognize enough. But I think partly because we don't put in mechanisms like this, where we use that early access by an audience to really tell us what's going on and why.
We find our opinions are wrong most of the time.
Almost. Yeah, I want to say all. Just always wrong.
Just always.
Pretty much. There's some weird, like, just to give you a little inside stuff of how we tried it. We're still experimenting like crazy. I'm sure most of the students here use Slack. You want to drive your developers insane? We actually installed Slack into our games, so when a user has a problem or feedback, it notifies the whole channel. Wow. After a while, at a 1 million user game, you're like, no! Make it stop. It's probably a misuse of technology, but it definitely reinforces how can we get as close as we can to that feedback.
Well, I genuinely love and I'm terrified by that idea.
We can go to the next slide here. This is just this goes back to business. It's just something. I think a lot of people, back to the oxygen one, a lot of people I think miss this one. It's been a hard lesson for me. Sam's actually taught me a lot of this. As a studio, guys, you make cash, you can do whatever you want. Your studio's breathing. So fundamentally, that's this whole thing. That goes back to Adventure Capitalists. It was great. It saved our studio. It started making a lot of money, which we still don't quite understand why it's an idle game that you can wait and you progress, yet you'll pay to go faster for... Somebody please do a study. So cash is oxygen. It'll give your studio freedom to get going. And then the next slide.
Just a point though, I do want to point that cash is a nicer slide, but it really means revenue.
Yeah.
It really means revenue, because there's a lot of funding that goes on, and when you get investment, or those are important components of building your game, but if you have funding, you didn't win. That's not the winning point. You need to have revenue as a validation and sustainability of your game.
That's the biggest metric.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I was going to focus on is, I don't know what your percentages of breakdown of revenues are, but I found a really interesting kind of behavior I take on. Well, that's good. That's a
venture capitalist.
But the thing I find fascinating for me is, I actually use venture capitalists as a mechanism to find games. Because I basically I don't bother going to app stores anymore. I just watch video ads.
Okay.
And I know I've got a bias on that because of what I do for a living, but I actually genuinely have got to the stage where Adventure Capitalist is my go-to game when I'm a bit bored and I want to find out what else to play. And I press the buttons, as work out whether I'm going to restart or not, and then I look at an ad.
Okay.
And if I like the ad, I'll end up going to get that game or not.
Okay.
They wouldn't approve one of our other ideas, and that was a game with a button, and you got to push the button every 24 hours, but if you watched an ad, you got to push the button twice. That didn't get approved. But our research actually shows just what you said.
Yeah.
People actually want to earn the right to watch more ads.
That was our biggest complaint.
Yeah.
It's like, this is not a game.
So let's go back on the fans of your character, but I think that kind of leads into that to a certain extent, doesn't it? Because we find these different behaviours of why people choose a game and how it fits into their daily routines. And for me, it's like I'm at an airport and I'm bored and I'm waiting to go somewhere, and that's my go-to moment. Everyone has their go-to moment for a game like this, and that's sort of, I think, partly why.
I don't know why, but I'm addicted to Boom Beach.
Yeah, it's Clash Royale for me.
One of the startling points for me when I came into the industry and I spent time with other game studios was I found that they did not have any customer support or player support. And so that was mind-boggling to me, because why would you not want to talk and hear and be a part of your player engagement and your player world? Players are not an interruption. They're the reason why we do what we do. Yeah. And so when we say fans are your currency, it's like we pull out the white gloves. We hope that you have a good experience. That's what we want. We have people who are dedicated. That we made a very strategic investment when we did that reflip with the smaller games, was we're going to make sure we take care of those people and give them good player support. And so we publish on our website. Not that many, well, actually there's quite a few people who go to our website, which surprises me. But we actually publish what our rating is for player support. Not what our game rating is, but what is our rating for player support. Because we think that that's so important that that's part of your experience. And so when we say fans are your currency, it's just a recognition that you don't sit around and just frivolously spend your money. You take care of your fans.
And that's slightly different from kind of some other games, because you're not focusing just on the ones who spend lots of money. You're focusing on the base as a whole. When we did our ad strategy, which was initially the you get a boost in your game by watching an ad. It seemed like common sense. It took a lot of people by storm, which we appreciated. Got us on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. That was pretty cool. But that whole aspect of thing was, how many ads do we put up? When we decided, we said, let's do it 4 times a day, because what would we like as a player?
It never came into our consciousness to think, well, what does that mean from a monetization strategy? It was all about what would players enjoy. And so that was a decision where it wasn't the money that was driving it, it was what do the players expect? What would they enjoy?
6 months of support emails that said, can I please watch more ads? We're like,
Thousands of requests.
We see the same thing in other games. I mean, the guys at Seriously, they're actually seeing an increase in player session length by having this ability to re-roll a daily reward just by watching a video. And so this is not isolated. This is something that's happening across the board.
But back to the OODA Loop.
Yeah.
As a studio, are you listening?
Yeah.
Are you observing it? Are you making a decision on it? Are you doing something with it? Instead of just like, oh, that was an interesting fact.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not the fact isn't the important bit. It's the doing something.
That's
isn't
right.
it? But you also said, again, leading into that, you don't chase features. So if you're listening and you're acting, how does that correspond with this idea of not chasing features?
This one's a funny statement. I keep telling my team we don't chase features. They keep reminding me that we've been featured 18 times. So I keep. It's back to the focusing on your audience. If you have read Lean Startup and everything, you know that it's really that first customer, and you're phoning them and talking to them and getting engaged and find out why they liked it, why they even downloaded in the first place, and get that information and grow. Because that growth of your audience, doesn't matter if Apple features you or Google features you or anyone, any feature. When you get to the million user actively over past 30 days, 40, 60, we're past now into a year of people still playing. The feature doesn't matter. You're making your sustainable game with revenue with long term. As a studio, I get scared when I see most of the industries happy with the chart that goes, day one, and then the plummeting thing to like nothing.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not a business. That's let's just throw it out there and see if it works, then move on to the next one. That's fine, but that's not really a business.
And that kind of takes us to, I think, the last slide.
Yeah. This one's tough. I'm an entrepreneur, so this one's easy for me. But walking around a game studio with a bunch of people that are artists, developers, and engineers and telling them to be entrepreneurial, it's actually hard. But this industry, the game industry's matured. If you're a reader of Blue Ocean Strategy or any of those business books, we're not in the blue ocean anymore. We are in a red ocean, and you need to be ready to run fast and fight hard. So we need to be entrepreneurs. I really believe in indie games, but the indies are going to get hard. It's going to get hard to compete. The Apple Store, the stores are closing. There's only so many games that can get featured. I like to make an analogy that it's like buying a game is like going to Walmart with the lights turned off, and you have to remember what you're looking for, and somebody hands it to you. That's how hard it's getting.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's a good place for us. We've also run out of time, but thank you very much, guys. I think that was a really good way to sort of kick us off, and I think it perfectly kind of denotes where we are. This whole space, particularly indie, we're going to talk a lot more about tomorrow. We're in a red ocean, and we need to be smart and work hard. Thank you very much.